Imagine it's 3 a.m., 300 meters beneath the granite of the Ural Mountains. Sensors register a seismic shock measuring 6 on the Richter scale. It isn't an earthquake. Seconds later, instruments detect a sharp radiation spike and a flash dozens of times brighter than the sun. In a spherical concrete bunker, the duty officer rushes to the communication consoles. He contacts the general staff in Moscow. Dead silence. He tries to reach the president's nuclear briefcase. Nothing. By every regulation, the country is leaderless. There is no one to give the order. There will be no retaliation. And then, on a monitor that has been dark for decades, a single word appears. Granted. Today we'll explore the chilling Cold War system called Perimeter, better known in the West as the Dead Hand. We'll discover what lies beneath the 900 meters of granite at Mount Yamantau. We'll learn how an ordinary missile became the postman of the apocalypse, delivering its orders through fire, radio interference, and the plasma of nuclear explosions. And we'll ask the question its creators wrestled with. Can a machine itself transfer the right to launch nuclear weapons to a person never authorized to wield them? And most importantly, why did the engineers who built this doomsday machine consider it not a triumph of death, but the highest act of humanism? Part 1. 2 names. 1 fear. The system has 2 names, and each tells a different story of the Cold War. The official Soviet name is Perimeter, born in Leningrad in the mid-1970s. There was no aggression in it, only dry logic. The designation of a defensive line no aggressor could cross. In the West, it received a far more sinister title, the Dead Hand. The name appeared in 1993, when journalist Bruce Blair described what he called the Russian doomsday machine in the New York Times. The metaphor was perfect, a hand that squeezes the throat of an enemy even after its owner is dead. Where the USSR saw a protective shield, the West saw inevitable vengeance from beyond the grave. But before this system acquired its names, the world had to learn, through terrifying near misses, why it needed to exist at all. Part 2. Black Saturday, 1962. In October 1962, the Florida Straits became the flashpoint of global conflict. The Cuban Missile Crisis revealed a problem that would haunt strategists for decades. 4 Soviet diesel submarines, including the legendary B-59, were sent to support Operation Anadir, Moscow's mirror response to American Jupiter missiles deployed in Turkey and Italy. When the blockade began, these submarines became the most isolated link in the nuclear command chain. On October 27th, what became known as Black Saturday, American destroyers detected B-59 and began dropping signaling depth charges. They wanted the submarine to surface. But inside the boat, the situation was perceived very differently. The Caribbean had turned Project 641 submarines, designed for northern latitudes, into traps. Air conditioning had failed. Temperatures climbed to 60 degrees Celsius. Carbon dioxide levels were off the charts. The rumble of explosions resonated through the steel hull, creating the illusion of full-scale attack. And the crew had been cut off from the world for days. Saltwater blocks high-frequency radio waves. To receive orders, the submarine had to surface, but American forces were on their tail. The crew didn't know whether war had already begun above them. Commander Savitsky concluded the conflict had entered its critical phase. He ordered preparations to fire a torpedo with a 10-kiloton nuclear yield, capable of destroying an American aircraft carrier group. Protocol required unanimous consent from 3 senior officers. Savitsky agreed. Political officer Maslenikov agreed. Only the voice of Vasily Arkhipov, the brigade's chief of staff, stopped the launch. Arkhipov had survived a near-catastrophic reactor accident aboard submarine K-19 2 years earlier. That brush with death had taught him cold calculation. He convinced the exhausted commander that the explosions outside weren't an attack. They were a signal to surface. For strategists, this episode revealed something terrifying. When centralized communication fails at the critical moment, the fate of the world collapses onto one person, exhausted, stressed, and starved of information. Perimeter, decades later, would be designed to ensure that retaliation never again depended on an information vacuum or pure chance. Part 3. The Paradox of Power. The years after Cuba brought détente, a period like thin ice that held only if you walked carefully. SALT-1 in 1972 capped launches. SALT II in 1979 attempted to limit warheads. Leaders smiled in public and built up their arsenals in private. By the mid-1970s, the USSR had achieved parity, 7,000 to 9,000 strategic warheads on each side. Soviet power rested on the land-based strategic missile forces. By the early 1980s, American intelligence estimated Soviet ICBMs carried approximately 6,000 warheads. The R-36M, known in the West as Satan, could deliver up to 10 independently targeted warheads from a single missile. And here lies the paradox of nuclear power. The more warheads you have, the safer you should feel. In reality, the opposite proves true. Thousands of warheads scattered across a vast territory become real force only when orders reach them. The more complex the structure, with its communication nodes, code chains, and command centers, the greater the risk that one precise strike could collapse everything. All that power dependent on a single center. Cut the communications, and 1,000 missiles become a pile of metal that no one can activate. Part 4. The Decapitation Doctrine. In Washington, strategists understood this vulnerability perfectly and built doctrine around it. In 1980, the Carter administration approved Directive PD-59, planning long-term nuclear campaigns prioritizing military targets and command systems. Under Reagan, document NSDD-13 emphasized creating survivable command and control infrastructure. Both superpowers pursued the same goal: protect your own brain, paralyze the enemies. The concept crystallized: the decapitation strike. Don't try to destroy thousands of fortified silos in the Siberian taiga. Strike the command bunkers and communication hubs in Moscow instead. This is why Pershing 2 missiles were deployed in Europe in 1983. A classic ICBM from American soil took 30 minutes to reach Moscow, enough time for hotline calls and warnings. The Pershing 2 flew that same distance in 5 to 8 minutes. The radar guidance system gave it accuracy within tens of meters. A Pershing 2 strike could paralyze Soviet leadership before any retaliation signal could reach the launch sites. The political climate matched the technology. Reagan's Evil Empire speech in March 1983 wasn't mere rhetoric. Translating conflict into the language of morality meant compromise was no longer possible. Evil isn't restrained. It's destroyed. Then came September 1st, 1983, the shooting down of Korean Airlines Flight 007 by a Soviet interceptor. The plane had drifted off course due to a routine autopilot error. In peacetime, this would mean wasted fuel. In 1983, it meant 269 deaths, and the world inching closer to war. 25 days later, on the night of September 26, 1983, an incident at the top-secret Serpukhov 15 facility nearly ended civilization. The Oko early warning satellite system detected the launch of an American Minuteman missile. Then 4 more. The display escalated to missile attack. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, the duty officer, had less than 15 minutes before the expected strike. But Petrov wasn't just any officer. He was an engineer who had helped develop the system's algorithms. He was troubled. 5 missiles didn't fit a decapitation strike which should begin with mass launch. Ground radars couldn't yet confirm targets beyond the horizon. Petrov reported the alert as false. He was right. A rare combination: the angle of the sun, the satellite's orbit, light reflecting off high cirrus clouds, had tricked the sensors into seeing rocket plumes that weren't there. Petrov prevented nuclear war. His reward was a reprimand for violating procedure. The world learned of his actions only in 1998. But the lesson for Soviet strategists was clear. Humans are the most unpredictable link in the deterrence chain. The fear crystallized into Operation Ryan, a vast intelligence program initiated by Yuri Andropov. KGB and GRU agents worldwide tracked hundreds of indirect signs of Western preparation for first strike. How long did the lights stay on at the Pentagon after midnight? Were hospitals near military bases stockpiling blood? Were military chaplains being deployed to forward positions? The peak came with NATO's Able Archer 83 exercises. For the West, routine. For Moscow, possible cover for a real attack. Soviet documents from the time contemplated NATO striking within 36 hours. Half of all SS-20 mobile missiles deployed to secret forest positions. MiG-23s in East Germany went on 30-minute alert. The 4th Air Army began loading live nuclear warheads onto bombers. This was no exercise. This was preparation for full-scale war. It was in this atmosphere that Perimeter was meant to serve as psychological stabilizer, guaranteeing that even if the first strike erased the command centers, retaliation would still come. Part 5. The Blueprint. The system wasn't an impulsive reaction to crisis. It required years of design work. On August 30th, 1974, the Soviet government issued Classified Decree No. 695-227, formally tasking the Yuzhnoye Design Bureau in Dnipropetrovsk with developing a special command system later known as Perimeter. Inside the Design Bureau, no one called it a Doomsday machine. The wording was modest. Create a second, backup command delivery circuit that doesn't depend on whether the first survives. The first circuit was the Kazbek system, the national network of secure nuclear communications, with its famous portable terminals, the Cheget, the nuclear briefcase. Perimeter would back this up in case of decapitation. The engineering solution was elegant. If all cables are cut and headquarters wiped from the map, a special command rocket launches. It doesn't fly toward the enemy. It flies over its own territory, becoming a giant flying megaphone, broadcasting launch commands to every surviving Soviet missile in silos, submarines, and aircraft. The Americans had built something similar, the ERCS, Emergency Rocket Communication System, back in the 1960s. But the philosophies differed fundamentally. The American system was purely a communications tool, requiring mandatory human authorization. Soviet engineers went further. Under certain conditions, their algorithm could close the circuit by itself. Part 6. The body perimeter has 3 components: body, brain, and voice. The body, the command rocket, became a competition between 2 great Soviet rocket schools. Vladimir Chelomey's OKB-52 with its mass-produced UR-100 series, and Mikhail Yangel's Yuzhnoye Design Bureau with its MR-UR-100 project. The choice fell on Dnipropetrovsk. Ministers understood the distinction. Chelomey built rockets for war. Yangel built rockets for surviving the war. Yangel had rejected the elegant but capricious liquid oxygen Korolev favored, choosing high boiling fuel components that allowed missiles to remain fully fueled and launch-ready for years. His school created ampulized weapons, combat-ready systems that endured radiation, vibration, and seismic shock. After Yangel's death in 1971, Vladimir Utkin took over. Utkin had served in the Great Patriotic War as a special communications mechanic in a frontline battalion. He had watched powerful divisions become blind, disoriented mobs the moment an enemy shell cut a cable. The frontline fear of muteness became his personal motivation. Under Utkin, the Satan missile became a lesson in survivability. For Perimeter, he chose not the most powerful platform, but the most predictable, the MR-UR-100UTTKH, designated 15A16. The command rocket wasn't meant to destroy anyone. It needed only to guarantee a few minutes of airtime as a stable broadcasting platform. Modified for its new task, it became the 15A11. To launch from the epicenter of disaster, engineers used a cold launch mortar. The engines don't fire inside the silo. A powerful powder piston literally shoots the rocket out. Only at altitude does it ignite. Even if the silo cover is buried under meters of debris, even if the shaft is deformed by seismic shock, the rocket still launches. Instead of a warhead, the rocket carries a 1,412-kilogram special equipment block, designation 15B99. The weight comes from massive shielding of lead, balfram, and special alloys, protecting electronics from the plasma and radiation of nuclear explosions. In space, micro-thrusters running on cold nitrogen counteract the inevitable rotation, freezing the device in a fixed orientation. Cold gas matters here. No combustion means no plasma cloud distorting the radio waves. The rocket climbs to an apogee of approximately 4,000 kilometers, nearly 10 times higher than the International Space Station. Not for records, but for geometry. From that height, direct radio visibility covers virtually all of Russia. The device becomes a continental megaphone with a 15-minute broadcasting window, methodically looping the same command over and over, giving collapsed silos and damaged submarines every chance to receive the signal through interference. Part 7. The Brain. A perfect body means nothing without logic to decide when to launch. The brain was built by the Leningrad NPO Impulse, the intellectual vanguard of the Soviet defense complex, source of the automated control systems for the strategic missile forces. Under chief designer Vladimir Melnik, the engineers faced a paradox: create something both absolutely decisive in aggression and extremely distrustful in peace. The brain needed sensory organs, but the engineers understood every sense could lie. A seismic shock might be an earthquake. A flash could be a fire. A radiation spike might be a local accident. So the system never trusted single indicators. It waited for correlation. Multiple frightening signs converging at one place, at one time, in ways no peaceful event could produce. From this came the famous algorithm of 4 yeses, its details revealed to the world by Colonel Valery Yarenich, Deputy Chief of Communications for the Strategic Missile Forces, in a 2009 Wired interview that some still consider professional betrayal. According to Yarenich, Perimeter served a primarily psychological purpose. It allowed leadership to not make hasty decisions. Knowing their deaths wouldn't prevent retaliation. The algorithm itself searches at each step for a reason to stop. First, yes, human decision. In peacetime, Perimeter has no autonomy. Only an officer in deep crisis can arm it. This addresses the central fear. The machine cannot start a war on its own. Second, yes, physical reality. Sensors confirm an actual nuclear attack. Not error, not provocation, but the unmistakable signature of impact. Third, yes, orphanhood. The system queries every command channel. If headquarters responds, Perimeter falls silent. A living person is always better than automation. But if attack is confirmed and Moscow remains silent, that silence becomes physical evidence. Command has been destroyed, along with those who would command it. Fourth, yes, the final human filter, the duty officer in the bunker. If leadership has gone silent but officers at the system's heart remain alive, they decide. Only if disaster is confirmed, communication with the center is dead, and the duty station has also fallen silent. Only then does the system close the circuit on its own. Part 8. The Fortress. Where physically does this brain live? Russian authorities have never published drawings or coordinates. What we know comes from Western analysts, satellite intelligence, and works like David Hoffman's book, The Dead Hand. According to American intelligence, the most likely candidate is Kosvinsky Kamen in the Urals, a mountain Western experts have watched for decades, recording enormous excavated soil volumes and powerful new power lines. The geology cannot be deceived. The mountain is composed of dunite, an extremely dense rock, around 3,300 kilograms per cubic meter. Ideal natural armor against gamma rays, capable of withstanding temperatures up to 2,700 degrees Celsius. 300 meters of dunite simply dissipates impact energy into the rock mass. Some calculations suggest the cushion could survive a 100 megaton explosion. Analysts reconstruct the interior as a vertical submarine, sealed modules on giant springs and shock absorbers, designed to dampen seismic shifts from nuclear strikes. Diesel generators large enough for over 30 days of isolation. Communications via secure cables to relay stations atop the mountain. Then there is Mount Yamantau, equally shrouded in mystery. In the 1990s, Western intelligence noted a closed city called Mezhgoria, vast excavation, thousands of builders in remote Ural taiga. By some estimates, a complex carved inside the mountain capable of accommodating tens of thousands of people. The logic of survival demands multiple fortresses, geographically dispersed. If one falls silent, command flows instantly to another. And inside these fortresses sit the officers, not action movie heroes, but people performing endless routine. Their task is to remain calm when catastrophe unfolds on their screens. They are the last filter of common sense built into the architecture. Part 9. Testing the silence. In December 1979, under Lieutenant General Varfolomei Korobushin's supervision, the first 15A11 command rocket launched from Kapustin Yar. Through 1982, the system was tested for its ability to penetrate the airwaves and deliver commands to every type of carrier. Receivers were installed across the country, in silos, on bombers, aboard submarines, transforming the scattered nuclear shield into a single network always ready to listen. Parallel tests at leading scientific centers simulated radiation and electromagnetic effects of nuclear strikes. The electronics survived loads far exceeding specification. By March 1982, Perimeter had become a global nervous system. In January 1985, it officially went on combat duty. After the collapse of the USSR and the START treaties, the first configuration was decommissioned. But the logic adapted to new carriers. In the 2000s, a modernized version called Sirena appeared. In 2011, Strategic Missile Forces Commander Sergei Karakayev confirmed Perimeter remained on duty. Today, its true strength lies in uncertainty. The absence of detailed information renders any decapitation strike pointless. You cannot decapitate what you cannot find. Part 10. The day tests are dry theory. The system begins where normal life ends. 2:30 a.m. Early warning satellites in geostationary orbit detect massive thermal plumes, the superheated exhaust of ballistic missile engines. To infrared sensors, these signatures blaze against the cold backdrop of the planet. For Perimeter, this isn't war yet. This is only the mathematics of ballistic curves. The country's leadership has the decision window, roughly 25 to 30 minutes during which satellite data must be confirmed by ground radar. No panic, just a dry double verification. 2:40 a.m., 20 minutes to impact. Based on radar confirmation, leadership transfers the right of response. They activate the codes. Perimeter switches from monitoring to standby for autonomous action. The trigger is cocked. From this moment, the system ceases to be merely electronics. It becomes a loaded weapon that will fire by itself if those who cocked it fall silent forever. 2:56 a.m. 4 minutes to the point of no return. The strike on the nerves of the state begins. Warheads reach command centers, communication nodes, key bunkers. Sensors embedded in granite and concrete take over. Accelerometers register vertical seismic shocks, fundamentally different from the wave-like pattern of natural earthquakes. Spectrometers record powerful light flashes. Ionization chambers detect hard radiation spikes. Pressure sensors capture the abnormal shockwave profile. A single signal could be malfunction. The combination, seismic, light, radiation, pressure, forms the indisputable physical signature of nuclear attack. 2:58 a.m. The algorithm of 4 yeses begins verification. First, yes, sanction, already given at 2:40. Second, yes, physical reality. The planet itself answers. Yes. Third, yes, orphanhood. Perimeter polls every general staff communication node, every government network, every nuclear command terminal. The machine searches painfully for someone still alive to answer. The symptom isn't noise, it's absolute sterile silence. The state has been decapitated. 3 a.m. In a deep bunker, the duty shift sees what the automation sees. Confirmed physical evidence of strikes, no connection with the first circuit, empty channels to political leadership. The automation system requests the human operator to launch the command rocket. If this is real and they hesitate, the state dies in silence. If they press the button, they begin a process physically impossible to abort. On the console, a single word lights up. Granted. 3:02 a.m. The silo opens. The mortar fires. The powder accumulator drives the rocket upward. At altitude, the engines ignite. Ballistics takes over. The apogee at 4,000 kilometers. The head separates. Micro-thrusters dampen rotation. The broadcast begins, not a single pulse, but continuous duplicated code, repeated and repeated through the 15-minute window. Across the country, receivers wake. Silo launchers begin pre-launch cycles. Mobile complexes scattered in forests move to firing positions. Submarines receive the signal through raised antennas at periscope depth. For those deep in the ocean, the ZEVS long-wave transmitter pierces the water with a short code. Service immediately. Strategic bombers receive orders via aerospace forces backup channels. The targets were chosen years before. In peacetime, the General Staff continuously updates operational packages, target lists distributed in advance to every silo, every missile carrier, every aircraft. The state as a living entity, no longer exists, but its last will is executed as a program. 3:15 a.m. Time no longer measures minutes to decision. It measures minutes to consequence. More than 1,500 warheads in the combined volley. Even with perfect air defense shooting down hundreds, most will reach their coordinates. The death of civilization comes not from individual explosions, but from their cumulative effect. At the epicenter, the human body has no time to feel pain. Organic tissue evaporates instantly. Dozens of kilometers away, the light flash burns the retina even through closed eyes. Third-degree burns from skin exposure. Synthetic clothing melts onto bodies. High-altitude detonations generate electromagnetic pulses covering entire continents. The digital death of the planet. In 1 second, power grids, communications, satellite navigation collapse. High-tech civilization fragments into isolated groups trapped in powerless towns. Industrial fires merge into firestorms. Soot and ash rise to the upper atmosphere, forming an impenetrable screen. Sunlight fades into nuclear twilight. Temperatures fall. Vegetation dies. Biology begins to kill those whom physics spared. Hospitals lose power. Transport arteries are severed. Food supplies stop. The state, as an institution of protection, ceases to exist. Survivors face radiation, hunger, and cold alone. This is no crisis to wait out in a basement. This is the point of no return. 3:27 a.m. We return to where we began. Deep within the granite, under the steady glow of lamps unchanged for decades, the word on the display board still glows. Granted. But here is where our reconstruction ends. Everything we just experienced was mathematical models and hypothetical scenarios. Since Perimeter went on duty in 1985, this sequence has never left the test benches, and this is the paradox at the heart of the system. Its triumph isn't measured in missiles launched or in the power of retaliation. Its true success is silence. Right now, as these words are spoken, deep beneath the Ural rock, monitors flicker. Duty shifts check their schedules. They listen to the pulse of the planet. The system is alive. It still senses every seismic sigh. It waits. The engineers who built Perimeter saw it not as a weapon of revenge, but as a guarantee against panic. By promising inevitable retaliation, the system removed the pressure to strike first on bad information. It gave leaders something more valuable than missiles. Time. Time not to end the world over a false alarm. And as long as Perimeter keeps listening to the silence, we can be sure that humanity still has a chance for tomorrow.